quick note before the video. I call this tank broken. It is, however, don't mix up being broken with being overpowered. Being broken means the tank is insanely good in one aspect. For example, the Hori is broken in penetration. This tank is broken in its damage output for 7 seconds. But don't mix that up with being OP, because being OP means being really strong in the game. A tank can be strong and broken and OP. However, the Waffentrager is not. It is just broken for a certain situation, and outside of that, it is not. So yeah, don't mix it up. Hello, in this video I'm going to be looking at the Waffentrager Auf E 100, or as it's been renamed, the Waffen F 1.0. So there's going to be 2 videos on this one, because this tank has 2 different guns, which while the gameplay is not too different, these 2 guns do have very different stats, and they each deserve their own separate video to cover sort of the vehicle's gameplay and how it is. So there will be a few overlapping sections in these videos. I'll try to cover the armor and mobility fairly quickly, just to look at the gun in depth, because that's really all this tank is about. It's 2 different guns. So as of this video's release, I'm not sure how this tank is, I'm not sure when this tank is going to be released. I do know how it's coming, which will be in event in the style of the Gala Party, which was the event with the FV 1066 Senlak, the Kampfpanzer 68, and the ST62 version 2. That happened in January last year. It's also in the same sort of format as the one that had the Rammer, the Annihilator, and the Smasher, which happened in August of 2024. Basically, this is going to be the rare tank that you have a small chance to get in crates. However, right now I'm not sure when that is coming, because we have been told we can release content on the Waffentrager on the 26th. However, we haven't got the BZ176 and the MBTB, which are also in the event, so not exactly sure when that is coming. But it will come in that event, and since it's releasing in that event, it's going to be ultra rare from that event, because just like with the Rammer, just like with the Senlak, it's got a low drop chance and there's no charms, which makes it hard to get. I'm not sure if this tank is going to be coming back easily in the future, because Wargaming did state rather specifically it's going to be quote-unquote rare. So I don't know if this tank is going to be released the normal way in the future or not. At this moment it remains unknown. However, it's a rare vehicle, and basically there's that. So, about the Waffentrager. What is this tank? It's a mobile sort of tank destroyer platform with a turret, sort of similar to the FV 4005 in terms of its general mobility. However, it has got more effective armor and, of course, an auto-loading gun. 2 auto-loading guns, actually. One of them is an accurate 5-shell autoloader with lower alpha damage. The other one is a rather inaccurate 3-shell autoloader with bigger amounts of alpha damage. So you might be asking, what's the better gun? The higher alpha one or the lower alpha one? The one with more shells or the one with less? So the one that is better is going to fit the meta better. You'll be able to get higher damage scores in battle more consistently. You'll be able to win battles more with is the 15 centimeter gun. The one with 570 alpha and 3 shells in the magazine. That's just going to fit the meta better, because you can trade damage more easily. It's got higher alpha damage, and of course it's got great HE, which is actually a really influential thing on this vehicle. The small gun, the one with 5 shells, the 12.8 centimeter, is still a good gun, but it fits the meta worse than the other one. It's not uncompetitive, it's not bad, but it's just not as competitive as the other gun. Personally, I find the small gun to be a lot more fun to play. So, with that out of the way, we can finally get into the stats of the vehicle. Oh, one thing to note, this tank with its two guns, it does look different, so how you tell them apart is the longer gun, the smaller gun, is the 12.8cm with 5 shells, and the larger, slightly thicker barrel with a shorter barrel is the 15cm with 3 shells. You can also tell by, of course, how fast the gun's shooting. If it's shooting very fast, then it's the smaller gun with 5 shells. If it's shooting slower and has a bigger gun sound, then it's the big gun with 3 shells. Me and some other people have kind of suggested to Wargaming to change the appearance of the big gun a bit more, for example like this, because it would really help to sort of deal with the enemy Waffentrager if you know very clearly what gun they are using, because while there is a difference now between the two guns, it's quite hard to tell, especially at a distance and at a glance, whereas adding something like a muzzle brake on the end of the larger gun would make it quite obvious as to what gun they're mounting. But that's just something we've suggested. You can tell them apart by how long the gun is. That's probably the most obvious. So, getting into the stats, there is a review on my website if you do want to have a look at that without the commentary. So, here you can see the tank, typical sort of tank destroyer, German tank destroyer, very weak lower plate, very weak turret, but in this case it's got a strong upper plate. And that is because it is the hull of an E100. It's not quite as strong as an E100, but it is up there in terms of its upper plate armor. And you can see that 325 to 390 millimeters thick, meaning that unless you're in a face hug, enemies do need to use premium ammo to go through the upper plate. And if enemies are kind of not too smart, you might be able to get a bounce off the upper plate, which has happened a few times in gameplay for me. Other than this though, you can see the flat areas of the turret front, 48mm to 52, that's very penetrable to HE, but the angled cheeks are an alright thickness of 105 to 130. And you'll see that here. Of course, switching to heat is going to be beneficial for dealing maximum damage for this tank, just because, of course, it is a sort of paper TD, and it doesn't have spool liner. So you can see here, you switch to HE, and then you can penetrate through these flat areas of the turret front. As said before, these are 48 to 52 thick. And then, of course, above and below the gun, and this little viewport here, those are 5mm. However, one thing to note, the HE view is really deceptive. This blue colour is actually really bad for highlighting HE, since it makes it sort of really hard to tell where is actually penetrable. And you can see that when you switch to HE, while yes, it's clear that these areas around the gun are penetrable, the sort of turret cheeks are a bit hard to tell, just due to that alternating sort of blue colour that you have on them. And you can see that really obviously when you use Blitz kit and you look at the HE view. You can see the clear green areas compared to here, where it's much less obvious where is penetrable and where isn't. And you can see when you do turn the turret cheek, of course, it is quite weak on the side, as that turret cheek is only 37mm. So, while HE protection is fairly good from the front, it's not invulnerable, and when you do turn the turret or the hull, you will be penetrable from that massive side profile of the turret, and of course the rear. And of course also to Hesh shells, just because Hesh generally has over 170 to 200mm and the turret is only 120 at most. So do be wary of Hesh as well. This protection is not terrible. It could have been worse. In fact, it was worse. One of the patches they did to the Waffentrager was buffing its frontal armor just to make it a bit more resistant to HE, and I'll say that was a very good change, because otherwise it just wouldn't be at all good news for the armor profile. So I'm going to skip over the gun because of course I'm doing a separate video just for this gun. The mobility, top speed is 38, that's pretty good. Reverse 12, that's not terrible, especially when you consider the 4005, but it's not great either. Traverse speed 40.8, that's pretty good, and 31 on medium terrain. For an E100 hull, that's not terrible, however, for overall, it's not great either. Its acceleration, 17.6, pretty good, 1472 horsepower because this tank does weigh a hefty 84 tons, and the actual acceleration rates being 17.6, again, that's good, and 13.5 on medium, again, it's still good. Terrain resistance is just average for the current meta, really. Overall, this is actually great mobility. It's not fast, but it's not bad. It's not as slow as a heavy tank. In fact, it's quite a bit more mobile than a heavy tank. It's definitely enough to get around. It's not quite as fast as an FE 4005, but it's still quite mobile, especially considering it's an E100 hull. So, finally, let's get into the gun. This section, I'll be talking about the small gun, the 5-shell autoloader, the 12.8cm. If you want to see the other gun, go to the other video, because I've got another full in-depth review of that other gun. So, this gun, sorry, that's not the 12.8, this is the 12.8. It has 340 alpha damage on standard, 300 on APCR, and 400 on HE. The 300 on APCR is actually pretty nice, considering generally it's guns with 350 that do 300 on premium ammo, so this one does have slightly above average premium damage, but its HE is completely normal and rather unimpressive. 5 shells in the magazine, massive magazine capacity for tier 10, 1.82 second entry clip, very nice, it's actually very quick. So in roughly 7.3 seconds it deals 1700 damage. Its magazine reload is 30 seconds, well 29, which is the longest in the game, and it is really noticeable. It's a really bad reload, and it makes this tank really inflexible compared to other auto-loading tank destroyers. If you thought the FE 4005 with its 21.5 second magazine reload was slow, yeah, think again, this has almost 30 seconds. Its DPM actually isn't bad, it's actually pretty good, 2800, not bad at all, and it just shows you sort of the unbalance that this tank is. 1700 damage, but an almost half-minute reload time. Penetration, 280, that is great. APCR is 360, that's also great. HE is 65, which is average for a 128. However, considering this tank's alpha damage is more like a 105, 65 is actually really good. Aim time, 3.3 or 3.5. Again, that's pretty average. There is no tank destroyer in tier 10 which has this kind of low alpha damage. However, for the lower alpha damage tank destroyers, this aim time is okay. It's nothing amazing. However, I will say, from playing the tank in battle, its aim time actually feels pretty nice, pretty good. Base aim time 2.1, again, nothing amazing. Dispersion 0.326, again, it's nothing amazing, but it's definitely not bad. And I have no issues with this dispersion, really. You can use refined gun to get it down to 0.277. Gun handling is 0.18, 0.18, 0.18, which does mean that you have the same kind of bloom no matter the kind of movement that you have. It is slightly worse than other tank destroyers because your turret traverse dispersion is the same as the hull traverse and movement. However, 0.18 as a base isn't terrible at all. In fact, it's pretty good. It's unfortunate that the turret has such bad dispersion, but considering it's sort of balanced out by the track and hull traverse dispersion, it's not the worst. Gun depression is 6 over the front, which is pretty poor. However, 8 degrees over the side is very nice, and it's very flexible when you can turn the hull and get the gun over the side. So I'll show you sort of the angles that those are. Right over the front, well, let's see this view. Right over the front is 6 degrees, as you can see here. You turn it to the side, it's still 6, but then as soon as you get off the hull it goes down to 8, and you can see the angle right there. The front 20 degrees on each side is 6, and then from there it's just 8 degrees all around. And this tank has a 135 degree turret traverse, so it's not fully traversable. However, it's quite flexible in terms of how you can sort of aim the gun. You can still sort of come around a corner backwards and shoot enemies, or aim over the rear and then sort of run away with your turret faced over the rear. It does mean that if you get circled by an enemy and they go this side, you do have to turn the turret all the way to the other side. If I can just do that like this, which does make it a bit awkward, but at least it does have quite a flexible gun arc. One thing to note, 1160 shell velocity is amazing. It's really nice shell velocity. You don't feel it as much on this tank as you do on something like a Guerrilla, just because this one generally it can play a bit more close up because it has slightly better protection and hit points, but also just because you kind of need to just to be able to get out those 5 shells because of this tank's just low alpha damage for it to work. But shell velocity is amazing. 1160 on standard, 1340 on APCR, and 890 on HE. Overall, this is an amazing gun in all aspects except alpha damage. And that's really the big limiting factor on this gun. It's accurate, it's got really quick intraclip, it's got great penetration, it's got great shell velocity, its gun depression is good, its gun handling isn't terrible, and its DPM, in all fairness, is not bad. However, the damage you do per shot is only 340, which is the same as something like an M48 Patton, an E50M, a CS63, and it does mean you can get out-traded really easily. If you only have the opportunity to put in one shot and the enemy goes back behind cover, you've only done 340 damage. That's kind of an issue. And then, of course, with every tank in tier 10, almost every tank in tier 10 having more than 340 alpha damage, oftentimes you'll get out-traded by that tank. However, if the enemy makes a mistake, if they pull out too far and you have that 1.8 second intraclip to be able to get that shot, that second shot in, then you've done 680 to them, and that's a pretty good trade. So if you can get in 2 shots, that's not bad. Of course, there's the issue that you've got a long reload, but we'll talk about that later. Of course, 5 shells also does offer an opportunity for you to do more damage to more enemies, which is nice. It means that if there are some low health enemies, or there are just multiple enemies to shoot, you can sort of split the damage over at maximum 5 targets, but generally it's 3 or 4, which is something quite nice this tank can do compared to other autoloaders. You can do sort of 2 shots into one tank, 2 shots into another, and then 1 into a third, or, you know, alternate how you do damage. It also gives you a chance to hit a shot that you miss, which I will show in gameplay on Black Goldville against a Lion. If you miss a shot, you've got, you know, 4 other chances to try and hit it, especially if it's a kill shot. Something else that's good, you can pick up low health kills with this gun a lot better than the other gun that this tank has, which has 570 alpha damage, and of course compared to a 4005, again with 5 shells and lower alpha damage, you are just better at picking up those low health kills. But other than this, it really does have an issue with damage trading, because 340 is just unfathomably low alpha damage. But that is the gun on this tank. You'll be able to see it in gameplay in a minute, so you'll be able to see sort of what I'm talking about in terms of that. But next, equipment. So, getting into equipment, I would say use improved ventilation. For this gun, for both guns, I set up the tank the same way for both guns. I'm going to say this with full transparency. I don't believe you need more penetration with how this tank plays. There will be some niche situations where you're like, oh, that more penetration would have been helpful, but in the majority of situations you do not need it as a tank destroyer. You have great standard penetration of 280 that can penetrate most targets. You've got great accuracy to be able to hit the weak points if you need to. You've got a fast intra-clip to be able to, deal out that damage with that good penetration. In the majority of situations, the more pen won't help you. There's a few tanks, for example a Jagdtiger or a Ho-Ri Type 1, which you might want to have the calibrated shells for, because it would mean that you can penetrate through their frontal armor without needing premium ammo. However, it's such a niche situation, and in every other scenario, it's just not benefiting to you. The improved ventilation is actually really useful on this tank. It adds almost a second faster reload time, which gives it 77 DPM, but DPM isn't as relevant on this tank as the reload time is. It improves your aim time, it improves your accuracy, it improves your turret turn rate, which is actually quite slow on this vehicle, it improves your hull traverse speed as well. It's just, well, you won't feel it as much as calibrated shells because it's a lot of small factors adding onto the tank rather than one big one. It does make a massive difference on this vehicle just to have better reload and better accuracy, especially as your alpha damage is quite low. If you hit a shot, if you miss a shot, I mean, it's going to be quite painful considering you have a 5-shell magazine, and that's kind of the selling point of this gun. While yes, calibrated shells, it can help in some situations, in most of them it won't. It will be overkill penetration that you don't need, and the accuracy and reload time would have been better. If you think about how this tank plays, it's generally not facing the frontal armor of enemy vehicles. Next, camo net, as this tank has terrible camo rating, quite like an FV215B183, an Object 268 version 4, or a Jagdpanzer E100. You definitely need camo net, despite this tank having fairly good view range, but who cares about view range on a tank destroyer? You really need the camo net, especially due to the large size of this vehicle. Next, accelerator, of course, because it does help to reach the top speed, and there's absolutely no issues with your hull traverse. Next, improved assembly, just because this tank, while it does have good upper plate armor, its turret and lower plate are both weak, and using enhanced armor really would do absolutely nothing. The turret is already generally resistant to the majority of HE shells in the game. It's only Hesh that will go through, and using enhanced armor doesn't actually help against Hesh. So improved assembly is the right choice in this case, especially as this tank, with a great 1,850 hit points, does actually benefit a fair bit from improved assembly. Next, gun laying drive, just because this tank has amazing shell velocity on this gun, and also having that better aim time is actually really nice. You don't need the shell velocity, it's already great. Next, vertical stabilizer. Refined gun is not so good on this gun in particular, because this gun has 0.326 dispersion, which is already very good for the general tier 10 tank destroyer. For this level of alpha damage, it's not as impressive, but think about how fast you're shooting the shells, how fast you need to be aiming in, and with this tank's fairly mobile hull and turret, you're constantly moving those two, so having vertical stabilizer is actually a big benefit. And also, remember, the turret traverse dispersion of this tank is 0.18, which is below average, so again, vertical stabilizer helps a lot. Next, toolbox, to help the repair speed and consumable delivery system, which is mandatory on this tank. Do not use high-end consumables. You are very much equipping the tank wrong if you do, just because it's actually completely useless on this vehicle. And the reason for that is, remember, this tank unloads its damage in 7 seconds for both guns. Its reload time is almost 30 seconds. And guess what? Both of the consumables that this tank has last for more than 7 seconds, so it's more than enough. Using the consumable delivery system does allow you to use these consumables basically one time every 2 magazines you reload, which is massive. It's basically half the time you're doing battle, you have these consumables active, which is actually a really big sort of balance thing for this vehicle. But yeah, this tank has shell reload boost, which is kind of OP for a vehicle of this type. It allows you to unload your damage much faster with both guns. It takes your intro clip down to 1.3 seconds on this smaller gun, down from 1.8 to 1.3, which is really quick. It means that your enemies really have very little time to respond before you've put in 2, maybe 3 shells into them. Combine this with reticle calibration, which lets you be pinpoint accurate as you're unloading your damage. It's just a really strong combination because you can be accurate and unload your damage very fast. And then again, cooldown of 45 and 38 seconds. After one reload without using those consumables, you reload again and then they're back, which is kind of OP considering you get 1 consumable use every 2 magazines. Provisions, on the other hand, are completely normal. Now, ammo. This is kind of important. For this small gun, load 5 HE. In most situations, you won't be using this HE. This HE is low damage. Its penetration is decent, but its low damage means it's generally not worth using over AP. And then 15 APCR just for when you do need to deal with heavier armor, though arguably it's not that often. You could lower it if you wanted to, but I wouldn't recommend it just because this tank generally has enough ammo. So the game crashed, so I'm re-recording the replays section. I do have 4 battles to show with this tank. The last one will be the best one, so you can skip to that if you want to. I'll try and talk about the gameplay of this vehicle a little bit. So this tank, very much like the 4005 in terms of how it plays, because it's a very situational vehicle. It has a massive reload time. But in the time it's unloading damage, it's extremely broken, just because you do so much damage so quickly, so effectively. Meaning you have to snipe in this vehicle at the start of the battle, just because you're waiting for things to happen, really. You can't push yourself because you're massive, you don't have much armor, and of course, if you push and you shoot all your shells, you're then reloading for 30 seconds. But watch this. 2 shots that quickly into the 183. You might think, oh, it's only 2 out of 5 in your magazine. I've not taken any damage in exchange for that. I'm completely safe over here, and I've done 630 to that 183. Pretty good trade, I'd say. Of course, it's not ideal, but it's alright. You can see the benefits of a sniping position in this situation. I've done damage, I'm not spotted. My massive size isn't an issue at the current time, but then when you do have to push up and sort of take the initiative, it's not going to go as well for this vehicle. You kind of have to wait for your team to do stuff. You can see I get spotted there because this tank has horrible camera rating. You have to wait for your team to do stuff. Your team has to push, your team has to take the attention of the enemies, so that you can catch them out and be an opportunistic little bugger. Because that's what you are as an auto-loading tank destroyer. By the way, watch this. I'm waiting for my consumables to come back. And then I activate both of them. 1, 2, 3, 4. And that Object 268 is dead. So yeah, broken tank in that regard. It's broken for 7 seconds and then it's just absolutely terrible for the next 30. But that's sort of how this vehicle is balanced. Here you can see my team having taken the attention of the enemies. This Object 268 being dead allows me to push up to the side of these tanks and start to unload my magazine again. Again, being an opportunistic little bugger. 2 shots into that 4005 means I have 3 shots left for this Kranvang. He's going to try and HE me, but again, for the Kranvang, that's not an easy task. And he fails, 138 damage. But my full magazine was unloaded and now I'm going on reload again. But you can sort of see how I'm playing this vehicle. It's a bit like a 183 but more mobile, or an FV4005, just a bit different. You have to wait for that time when your team has taken the attention of the enemies aren't looking at you, and then you come up on the side or the rear and you do massive amounts of damage to them. And then you go away, you hide for your reload time. The 183 and the 4005 would be a bit more responsive with their around 20-second reload, This one, having 30, does need to play a lot more carefully with its positioning and using its allies to support it. But you can sort of see that was a good way to show the gameplay, really. You start the tank, start the battle sniping. When the battle progresses, you push forward and try to let your allies take the hits for you. Be your meat shield, be the distraction while you go in and put in the massive damage. That's how this tank is going to work best, because you are just the damage dealer. You aren't supposed to do anything else. 105,000 credits were made in that battle, which is pretty okay for a tier 10. Next battle is on New Bay. So this one isn't a win, however it does show sort of the benefits of the 5-shell gun compared to the 3-shell gun. And I'll say right now, I like the 5-shell gun more than the 3-shell gun. I won't deny, my stats in the 5-shell gun are worse, but oh my goodness, this gun is so much fun to play. It's like the Gravedigger, but it's got actually respectable alpha damage. If you think about the Gravedigger in tier 7, it does 90, that would be like doing, what, 140, 180 damage in tier 10, but this one, it has 340, which, while yes it's low, it's not like the 90 of the Gravedigger in tier 7. So here you can see my turret is turned to the side, I get spotted, again poor camo rating, but there's an E75 crossing, you can sort of see my slow turret reverse. I only get to 1 shell in, but the good accuracy does let me hit that. Again here, notice the Jagdtiger, he turns his hull, and his upper plate becomes red. That's the situation where I was saying, oh, calibrated shells might help in that niche situation, when you do have a Jagdtiger angling his armor. But notice there, saved 2 shells, and I managed to put them into the Leopard 1, which does allow me to do a total of 1300 in this first magazine. If I had reloaded there after shooting the Jagdtiger and not waiting, I wouldn't have got that extra damage out into the Leopard. So having the 5 shells is pretty nice. You can do 3 and then just wait a bit and you might get 2 more in. Here you can see against the Object 263, I'm going to activate the consumable, I believe, just to be more accurate. Yeah. Only managed to get the consumable for 1 shell use, but still you can see the fast injury clip was helpful for getting out 3 shells into that guy. Here you can see I'm waiting, hoping for the damage to come to me, but I really should have reloaded so I could try and go after that E100 and the Jagdtiger over there. Also notice something, that Jagdtiger, he was on 1500 hit points. That's a 1 clip to me. That's sort of what makes this tank broken. And I'm saying broken not as in OP, but it's broken in 7 seconds, and then it's just bad. That is something to note on this vehicle. Don't mistake being broken with being OP. This tank is broken for 7 seconds, then it's crap. An OP tank is just strong in almost all situations. That is not what this tank is. But here notice the E100, 1577 points. He would be a 1 clip, however I decide to go for the Jagdtiger. I do hesitate a bit and use APCR, but you can see I still get out the full 5 shells of my magazine, which do 818 into the E100. So my push there got 2 tanks killed. I did die in the process, but it got 2 tanks killed, which is kind of something to note about this vehicle. You do massive damage in a short amount of time. Unfortunately, this E100, bit of a not great player, so I tell him to move, but oh well. We do lose that game in the end. 3,788 damage. You can see this tank racks up damage fairly quickly. I didn't actually unload all that much, around 3 magazines worth, but I do still get a good damage score. So, next, Oasis Palms. In this battle, you will be able to sort of see the benefits of 5 shells again. Of course, I'm not going to show bad battles in this video just because they're not interesting to watch. You're here to see sort of how this tank does when it does well. Of course, there are plenty of situations where this tank does terrible. Like I said, it's a tank that's OP for 7 seconds, then crap for 30. and that means that you will do very good in a lot of battles, but then crap in the rest. That's just how the vehicle is. There's not really too much of an in-between, especially when you've got 30-second reload. But here you'll see, again, taking up a sniping position at the beginning of this battle, hoping that Progetto pushes, but hey look, a Project Murat. I activate the consumables and here we go. 1,000 damage in 3 shots, he takes 1 and then he's dead. That guy wasn't too happy, he downvotes me after the battle. But yeah, unfortunate, he wouldn't have known what hit him really. But now, on my reload, I decide I'm going to try and support the heavy tanks on this side because they're outnumbered, I think 2 to 5 or something, 2 to 4. So I decide to come over here and try to get some shots into that Object 268, which I'm expecting will push. You can see I don't even try for that Progetto just because my turret traverse is fairly slow. And here I'm going to snap a shot in, unfortunately it goes low. But fast injury clip of 1.8 allows me to put in a second shot, which is pretty nice. And then I could shoot this Progetto, but again, my fairly slow turning turret, and I don't want to risk that shot just because my reload is 30 seconds. Luckily the Kampfpanzer clears him. So here comes the Object 268. We've got 3 shells left, let's see if we can clear it. He's going to turn around and I'm going to use 1 HE, which does actually take him down a fair bit, and I managed to clear him. Now I'm alone here against 3 tanks. I'm going to try run down into the river, hoping that those guys on the dunes do manage to clear the last enemy so they can come back and try and support me. So the thing about this tank, you don't want to push it. It's like an FV 4005 because if you've taken any damage in the battle and you push this tank, you're screwed. This does 1,700 hit points, and if you've got that much hit points left at this stage of the battle, you're doing very well. You'd be able to survive a magazine from the Waffentrager. But it's a vehicle you don't want to push, and watch this Rhinoceronte. 1 shot, then a low roll, but third means I kill him. And now I'm reloading, so we can hopefully go and clear that WZ. But again, you can see the 5 shells, really big sort of advantage in the situation that I was there. Against the T95E6, he was 114 hit points, 1 shell to clear him, I've got 4 left. 3 of them into the Rhinoceronte because I low rolled one of them. At that point I've shot 4 and then I reload the last one to have a full magazine against this WZ. You have to note the 4005 with its worse accuracy might have been harder to deal with that situation, and then the other gun on this tank, if I'd low rolled against the Rhinoceronte, I wouldn't have managed to get in a 30-second reload before he shut me down. But here you can see 3,300 damage. First class, you can see that guy from 7-star wasn't too happy about me doing 4 shots that quickly, but yeah, unfortunate mate, that's just how this tank works. But yeah, one more battle on Black Goldville. So in this game, you'll be able to see sort of when you do miss in this tank, having 5 shells does help you, because they're extra chances to get a kill shot. Of course, that is a fairly niche situation compared to the other gun, where having alpha damage is just generally a lot better, but sometimes having the larger magazine with smaller damage is actually quite beneficial in some scenarios. Again, I wouldn't say this is the better gun, in fact it's not. The other gun is just better, but I really like this gun because it's quite fun to play and I really enjoy its good accuracy compared to the other gun, which is fairly derpy. But it's for good reason, and you'll see that in the other review. So here again, taking up a sniping position, because this tank, it's got a large size, it's got a horrible camo rating. So you don't want to push too aggressively. You want to wait for your team to do stuff so that you can react to how, how they play, and react to enemies who are just a little bit distracted. take an opportunity against them and deal your damage. An opportunistic damage dealer, that is what the Waffenträger is. So here notice the lion crossing, 1 shot, 2 shot, and of course I activated the consumables, so I was a little bit slow to react because I wanted to have those. Arguably I should have shot first, then activated them. But here you'll see the large size of the vehicle, not great. Taking a shot from the 907 and I'm completely unable to spot him. You can see I'm holding my 3 shells, hoping to get more damage into the lion, and then I finally reload. But again, I take a shot from the lion, that will be that bush sort of blocking me from spotting him, which is unfortunate. But I'm now just waiting for my reload. I encourage the heavy tanks to push because the Kranvang is just sitting in the corner. There are a bunch of TDs in the spawn dealing with our T95 and probably soon to be E100. So here you can see, almost reloaded, the lion. Very tantalizing to shoot him, and then he pulls back, unfortunate. He's got 910 damage, which means in 3 shots I can kill him, so I have slight room for error. There's 1, there's 2, I just need 1 more, and he's sort of poking, again very tantalizing, and I miss. But then, 1 more shell gives me a second chance. So that's something nice about this gun. If you miss, if you sort of need multiple shots in an enemy and you aren't being pressured by the enemy team, like I was here, I had the cover to be able to take that time, then having that extra shell is actually really good for having a second chance. So again, our heavy tanks are just not moving, and me and this T95 as tank destroyers are having to sort of put pressure on the enemies. Here you can see I do luckily high roll on the Badger, but that takes me down 1 shell, which is an important thing to note. Notice this Object 268 pushing up 1872 hit points, me with only 4 shells. I'm not going to be able to kill him. Even if I had 5, I'd have to sort of high roll in a few. But here you can see I take a heat shell, I believe, and now I'm not going to out-reload this guy, so I'm sort of praying that he is going to bounce, and he does bounce off the upper plate. I'm not too sure why he did that, because my turret is massive, very easy for him to aim up and shoot, and he could also aim down on the lower part of the upper plate because of his high penetration, but oh well, a bit lucky for me I guess. Here I'm sort of distracted and I only managed to get this 1 shell into the 50 TP, but that was my fault, that was my bad. Do 4000 damage and that 50 TP of course dies. So you can see I did block 1 shot of damage. The upper plate not entirely useless, especially at long range where enemies might just rush a shot against you and then hit the upper plate. Again, 109,000 credits. But yeah, small gun, ooh, T2064, small gun on this tank. Bit of an interesting gun. It's not as good as the big gun, however it is very fun to play. It's very enjoyable, very unique experience. Compared to the FE4005, it's nice to have some pretty good accuracy, it's nice to have such a fast intraclip, and it's nice to have really just an effective long range armament. Yes, its damage isn't as good, but it's pretty interesting and fun to play. So how good is this tank? I'd say it's not that good, just like the FE4005. But just like the FE, it is entirely broken when it is unloading its damage. Outside of that, it is not. That's just due to how these tanks are balanced. They're, well, the FE now doesn't have such an effective gun. It's not as accurate as it once was. Its aim time has been nerfed and it's got its consumable removed. But the 4005, like the Waffenträger, is a tank which does insane damage when it is unloading, and that makes it broken, really. You can just clear tanks if they've taken a single shot of damage. For example, a medium, you can clear a lower health tier 9 tank with a single magazine, which, how can you counter that, really? It's just broken. However, after you've unloaded the damage, you're a terrible tank. You've got poor armor, poor camo rating, mobility, while good, it's not super fast like a Guerrilla 15, and that's sort of how this vehicle is balanced. Complete black and white. Stupidly broken when doing damage, but stupidly terrible when not. But that's just how these vehicles are. Overall, it's not the worst tank you can play. It's not bad by any means. And you can see that with the battles I had. I did do some with pretty good damage, though nothing super insane. But yeah, this tank, this Waffenträger, it's just a vehicle for fun, really, I'd say, especially on this gun. It's not something super competitive that you absolutely must have, because it's insanely broken and going to sort of ruin tier 10. It's not that, really. It's an interesting tank. If you can get it, I'd say go for it. If it ever comes for gold, or, you know, a draw or something, and you do have the gold to go for it, it's definitely an interesting vehicle. But yeah, that's the 128mm gun on the Waffenträger. If you do want to see gameplay and a review of the 150, there is another video on the channel as this one is uploaded. Of course, the review sections are a bit overlapping, so you can just skip to the gameplay if you want. But yeah, thanks for watching.